All right, y'all. Good evening. Real quick, just want to start out by saying rest in peace to Breonna Taylor. Um, I want to send condolences and nothing but mad love and respect to her family. The people that perpetrated that crime against her should, of course, be prosecuted and locked up at a minimum. But I don't really want to talk about that. So many people, far more politically savvy than myself, far more educated, have already addressed the politics and the injustice surrounding the Breonna Taylor case. What I want to do is talk about it in a way that I haven't heard it mentioned up to this point. I want to talk about what kind of lesson can we extract from the Breonna Taylor case. What kind of lessons can we glean that can be passed on to our youth to help them make some decisions that may prevent them from experiencing those types of outcomes? Um, any street cat can kind of validate what I'm about to say. Any guy that spent any time around street cats know that what I'm about to say is absolutely true. Um, Street guys have always used the women in their lives as tools and extensions of whatever criminal enterprise they may have been engaged in. Uh, the women receive less scrutiny because they were female. They could get past certain checkpoints. They could do things that men couldn't typically do without being under the microscope. So, um, when guys needed to rent homes, rent cars, they a lot of times leaned on the women that was in their life. A lot of this is also because the women had a higher rate of employment. So if somebody W-2s needed to be shown, if somebody's credit needed to be run, it was highly likely that that person would be a female because the guys was unemployed. They hadn't had, steady jobs. They couldn't produce W-2s, but the females could. So guys, girlfriends, baby mothers, wives, sisters, little cousins, homegirls, up the block, all of those females, man, was potential tools to be utilized. Guys would send them up north to the penitentiary with stuff stuffed in they backsides to hand off the dudes in the visiting room. Uh, Plenty of girls then caught cases like that. They would send girls down to the Enterprise rent a car, the Avis rent a car, to get a vehicle that they knew they was gonna be trafficking narcotics in. A lot of girls have been brought into conspiracies as a result of that. Um, Guys would get their mothers and even grandmothers in some cases to rent apartments for them, buy whole apartment buildings. Some of the major cats, they was buying whole buildings and they was getting that stuff in their mamas and their aunties' name. And when things got bad and the feds picked the case up, they was hip to that play. There used to be a time that if you put something in your family members' names, and those people had legitimate incomes that could be verified, they had jobs and whatnot, that stuff was off limits. As the law evolved, as the crack and drug era kind of took off in the 80s and 90s, they started, altering those laws and evolving how they adjudicate those cases. And there was women being drugged into a court just because they had rented the car or they had bought the house. They was getting hit with money laundering charges. They was getting hit with aiding and abetting charges. They was getting placed on the conspiracy, on the indictment, as if they was one of the guys out there moving around with the bag themselves. But it still didn't stop guys from doing it. Guys would get with a young lady, man, that already had children, so she was getting Section 8, she was getting some food stamps, had somewhere to stay, and guys would use their house to crash. And if they needed to shoot moves while they was laying up with the young lady, they did. They'd have people meet them right at the girl's house. Like, this is just what guys, tended to do in regards to the females in the community that kind of came up in the hood and came up around them. They would utilize these girls' residence as bases of operations, as storage points, stash houses, and that's just what it is. Um, I think some of what happened to Breonna Taylor is something that has happened to so many of our little cousins and wives, girlfriends. She fell in love with a dope boy or had some type of relationship with a guy that was definitely in the streets and under the investigation of the Narcotics Task Force down there in Louisville, and as a result, she had got drugged into that. Um, I don't think that's a crime worthy of death by any stretch of the imagination. But let's just be honest, would her house been targeted by the police if the dudes that she was messing with, say, worked at that Corvette plant up in Bowling Green? If they was one of the many guys that's traveling every day from Louisville down to Georgetown, Kentucky to work in the Toyota plant, would that have happened? Probably not. Even if she was dealing with one of the little knucklehead students down there at U of L, that probably wouldn't have happened. Almost any type of average, everyday working black man, had she been involved with that kind of guy, the outcome would have probably been so much different. Her name wouldn't have got brought up in so much stuff. I've read an article that said her car, a car that was in her name, a guy had been found dead in the thing. Anytime, there's a homicide and your name is somehow attached to that homicide, you becoming a potential accessory before or after the fact. Even though you may not be the shooter, you may not be the culprit, you guilty by association until proven otherwise when you're talking about some death. So in addition to the various instances where, the guy was in and around her, doing different things that the police was able to validate, somebody had got killed. I also read an article that said, that the police department had some phone calls, with her on a jail phone. Let me remind you too, all conversations to any type of penal institution, whether it's a jail, prison, juvenile detention center, precinct, you have to assume all of those calls are definitely being recorded. At any rate, they had some transcripts where, she was kind of helping dude, still move around while he was incarcerated. And all she was probably doing was rounding up the bread that some guys had owed him. She probably wasn't dropping nothing off herself and, probably wasn't around or knew anything about the transaction. He was just sending her the way we send our girls. Hey, go pick that up for me, baby. And, if you love a guy, man, or have some love for a guy, she might not even be in love with him at that point. But the fact that she had some love and respect for the guy and he was in a situation, couldn't help himself, she felt compelled to help him. I don't think that's a crime, period. And I definitely don't think it's a crime worth dying for. But there are some negative things that can come out of that. In this particular instance, it was the police. But there have been countless young ladies that have been killed alongside these guys. They have been in the house when home invasions took place, and they end up getting beat up, tied up, killed, raped in some cases. So when you dealing with these types of guys, all of those things are possible. You can be killed alongside these dudes. So what am I saying? Again, rest in peace to Breonna Taylor. No disrespect at all to her or her family and her loved ones. I think she was a good woman. All the reports say that she was a stand-up young lady that was employed and was doing some good things, right? So I don't have nothing bad to say about her. But I want us to teach our daughters to make better decisions in the men that they choose to be with. I know some girls, man, and some women love my nasty, funky ass when I was not necessarily in my right mind, wasn't doing the right things. They might have fell in love with the conversation, they might have fell in love with the looks, they might have fell in love with the money that the guy was touching. you know um, but it's dangerous, and I would hope that my daughter would do better. I want my daughter to get with a guy that's gainfully employed, that's educated, or he's seeking his education. Somebody that's trying to go to college, even if it's just night school, online classes, you know, and working every day. I'm not saying that she got to get a cold-blooded square. I ain't saying she got to get a sucker, right? But she got to get a guy that understand, ain't no future in criminality. You know what I'm saying? It's a dead end, man. It's a poor line of work. Not to knock the hustle, man. Not to knock the guys that's out there. But it's a poor line of work, man. And all real dudes know that shit because they done already seen too many good people lose their life. They done already seen, guys going to the penitentiary for 20, 30, 40 years to life and leaving behind, children that are at a great disadvantage because their absence. You know what I'm saying? These women and children that are left behind while we out here trying to be super gangster. I mean, that shit, it's just not what's up, man. And it's important that we teach our young women to pick their mates wisely. Even your date, even if you don't plan on being with this guy for the rest of your life, even if you don't plan on having children with this man, just dating. You need to date guys that have a future. You need to date guys that are not involved in certain things, that don't come with a certain amount of emotional baggage and negative energy that can cause negative things to happen to you. You need to stay away from them dope boys. Stay away from them scam artists. Stay away from them guys that come from tattered and battered homes, because they carrying that energy. They gonna go upside your head and do something to you. It's just a matter of time. You need to look at a guy, look at his parents. What type of stock do he come from? You know what I'm saying? Is his parents God-fearing people that work every day, that have educations? Are they homeowners? Do they own their vehicles? Or is it, a bunch of riffraff in and out of apartments and two family flats, that don't want nothing, ain't trying to go get nothing. You know what I'm saying? You can tell a lot by a guy by his parents and his family. You know what I'm saying? Where they from? What is they doing? You know what I mean? And what's his goals? What's he trying to do with himself? If he getting up every day, man, punching a clock, even though he may not be making a ton of money now, with the right inspiration, right education, he can be holding the bag in just a few years. You know what I'm saying? And that's that's far more preferable than the guy that seemed like he got the world today, but then he lose his life, or he end up in a penitentiary, then drag you into the damn conspiracy. You know what I'm saying? Or get your house shot up, get your mama house shot up. You know what I mean? Get your kids killed, behind some shit that he's doing. We got to do better, young ladies. And men, make sure you teaching your daughters that. All right, so that's what we can learn from the Breonna Taylor case, aside from the racism, right? We already know about that. You know what I'm saying? We've been dealing with this stuff for hundreds of years. We already know about that. We already understand the political and racial aspects of that case. But do you understand that whether or not your daughter lives or dies or prospers is going to be highly dependent upon the type of man she chooses to let into her life? Let's teach our daughters to do better. Again, rest in peace, Breonna Taylor. 1.